Good. So we'll turn things over to our CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the first item on our agenda, of course, is a motion with respect to holding this meeting electronically pursuant to the provincial health order without members of the public present in the boardroom.
Adamson moved.
Thank you. Move Adamson, second Director Raymond. All in favor? Contrary? Motion carries.
The next is your report from our Regional and Corporate Services Committee meeting this morning.
I'll keep my report as short as the meeting was, which, well, actually the meeting may have lasted 5 minutes, but there were no materials outside of the written agenda. So I don't have a report for us today.
All right, Mr. Chair. So then the next item would be approval of the agenda, and late items. And I would just like to note that we would like to vary the order of items 8.2 and 8.1. So suggesting that we would accomplish 8.2 first in advance of 8.1.
Okay, with those changes, do we have a motion?
Adamson moved.
Move Director Adamson, second Director Bales. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Contrary? Motion carries.
Next is 4.1. We have a delegation by Keith and Charlene Gray regarding DVP application 2020-22 for 9489 McMillan Road in Electoral Area D. And I believe Ms. Van Ness said that they would be attending by phone.
That is correct. So we do have Charlene Gray on the line with us. She is attending by phone. So we'll just work to have our administration team unmute her and bring her into the meeting.
Hello.
Welcome. Is this Mr. Gray?
Yes, it is.
Welcome, Mr. Gray. You have 10 minutes as a delegation on the issue you'd like to present before the committee. So feel free to start.
Did you read our written submission for the minutes?
Staff, did we get a written submission from the Grays?
I'll just look to Ms. Van Ness or to Mr. Daniluz with respect to this item.
So through the committee, I can confirm that as part of the development variance permit application sent in by the delegates, that there is a 2-page written submission in the application.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Van Ness. So you can go ahead, Mr. Gray.
Hi, I don't have it in front of me, but basically our issue was that we've been here 40 years. We had a permit for the other barn that burnt down. We had a fire on March 22nd, 2020. We had no idea that we were required to apply for a permit. We have animals. We lost animals in the fire. We have cattle, horses, goats that we need to care for. We've rebuilt the barn, or the frame of the barn, when there was a stop work order placed on. We consulted a lawyer who said we should qualify for the grandfather's clause because there was 25% of the building remaining. We had a meeting with the board members who advised us to apply for a variance permit. We did that. We paid the $1,600, which apparently is the price if you start to build without a permit. We were led to believe that if we did that, it would resolve the problem. We had a meeting with Tracy out here so she could see the site. Our property, our 10.25 acre property, is bordered by a hay field with power lines and gas lines. We're at the end of a dead-end road, so the chance of development is limited. The problem, we also were asked to obtain a site survey, and we did that and submitted everything to the board. We had a site meeting with Tracy, who led us to believe that there had been a meeting to support our application. One of the problems is that the very corner of our dry storage building is very close to the property line. We've lived here for 40 years. It's never been an issue. It's the property line apparently follows the middle of the road, and about 4 feet from that, there's a ditch that only has water in it from about November until April. We were advised that we needed to do an environmental assessment. I didn't have the money to do that. We didn't have insurance on the barns that built down, so we used our savings to rebuild. We're both retired senior citizens. We have a limited income. I've made that clear to everybody from the get-go. I couldn't afford the environmental assessment, and as a result of that, we were advised that our application would no longer be supported. We feel like we've been severely traumatized by the fire. We've had considerable loss, and we've incurred considerable debt because we had to replace our tractor and farm machinery. We've used the majority of our savings, and we respectfully request that our variance be looked at really seriously. Apparently, the board looks at cases of hardship, and we think we qualify in spades. And that's basically what I'd like to say and what our written submission should cover.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Gray. And I think certainly our committee recognizes the situation you find yourselves in. And it's in our interest that we can accommodate your needs in any way we can facilitate. On the other hand, our staff ensures that we exercise good governance here, and that we try and do things in the most effective way possible. So maybe I'll just ask our planning staff to give their view on these matters.
Certainly.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. This is a challenging variance application for us. We recognize that the situation that the property owners were in with the loss of their barn and the impact it had on their animals. And they had certainly explained to us what the fire and rebuilding meant for them financially. And from our perspective, we worked very hard with them to overcome the issues associated with the file. We find ourselves in a position of supporting a part of the variance, which is for a metal Quonset structure, but not able to support the setback that the property owners want to see for a wooden pole barn. The setback amounts to a reduction from 30 meters to 15 centimeters clear to sky from the eaves, and about 50 centimeters, I'd suggest, from the wall of the wall of the building. These are very small setbacks. It means that traversing around the building, maintaining the building would need to be done by entering the neighbor's property, and staff, we were unable to support that small variance in this case. It doesn't mean that the owners are required to tear the building down. That's a separate question that the board could consider. I'd suggest that an outcome of the bylaw enforcement file respecting the pole barn could be a notice to title. And typically where we place a notice to title, that's to alert future purchasers, lenders, and others that there's a bylaw enforcement issue. And after we do that, we're not looking to take any further action. In this case, there's no particular health and safety concern with the pole barn. And I think that would end our bylaw enforcement activity. So there's an avenue for the owners to be able to retain this building without the regional district, I believe, being put in an awkward position of having to support 15-centimeter setbacks for this pole barn.
Good, thank you, Mr. Danilus. So, Ms. Gray, did you hear the staff's position on this file? Ms. Gray, are you still there?
Yes. I had just had to unmute my phone.
Yeah, well, that's fine.
Yeah, no. Yeah, we can certainly live with that outcome. Yeah, it's my understanding that the variance would be supported for the metal Quonset barn, and I think we were 15 feet short of the distance between the barn and the house, but that the pole barn would be registered against the title as whatever it's called.
Yeah, that's a notice on title to warn any future purchasers of the property that there are buildings that are outside of the allowances through the bylaw. So we're just protecting any future landowners, but the staff are saying that they see that the barn can stay up and you should be able to operate as you have been. It is a very complicated situation in that you're 15 centimeters away from the property line. I would suppose the neighbor could put a fence along that property line. It's also the
Well, if they did, they'd fence off our entrance to our property.
Yeah, well, we aren't going to worry about that. We're just saying that the staff are concerned that
Well, I understand that, but like I say, it's like 3 feet from a ditch.
Yeah,
It's like 3 feet from a ditch is where the property line is. So there would be no logical or practical reason to put a fence there.
Good.
Even though it is the legal property line.
Okay, thank you. It appears that there is a way to meet your needs and also the needs of our organization. So it sounds like we do have a solution in place.
Okay, then.
Good.
Do we make the motion?
No, that was just a delegation. There doesn't need to be a motion.
Okay.
The item does come up later in the agenda. So thank you. So thank you, Ms. Gray, for coming and speaking to us today. Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So moving to the next delegation, which is item 4.2, we have Lois Duray regarding DBP application 2021-11 for 134-14 600 Morris Valley Road in Electoral Area C.
Okay. Ms. Garay, are you online?
There we go. I got myself unmuted. It actually is Garay. It's very similar to the last caller. Yeah.
Okay, good. And so you once again, you have 10 minutes to make the presentation to the committee. Please go ahead.
Okay. What I did was I wrote myself a script. It's only going to make sense if it's applied to the corporate report and the information submitted with the DBP. Okay, so as I said, my name's Lois Gray. I own lot 134 in Tapadera Estates. I've owned my lot for a year at the end of June. I understand that the basis of the Fraser Valley Regional District, as it is stated in the corporate report, and in May, I postponed my DVP application and took a month to research and consider the report carefully. During that consideration, I purchased the National Fire Protection Agency standards 1192 and 1194. These standards are for RVs and holiday parks. I've read them and understand the standards that are mentioned in the corporate report. I fully understand the fire issues with RVs and what causes fires in RVs. So this question for me is still, what fire risk does the construction of an aluminum ramada pose? In this circumstance, the ramada I want to construct poses no fire risk. My variance application and proposed ramada construction do not increase the fire risk to the entire park. An aluminum ramada is not combustible. Tapadera Estates is an upstanding holiday community that is safety conscious and neighborly. It is orderly and organized. The forefathers of this community constructed access to the lots so that fire equipment will be easily brought in if needed. And we have 2 additional gates to ensure this access. In the years since, the owners have added changes that are needed for the changing times. And of course, we have the required number of hydrants. And as far as holiday parks go, ours is above standard or above average with safety concerns. The Fraser Valley Regional District is doing a great job by interpreting codes and standards and basing their reply on that interpretation. However, I have to say once again, a variance is an opportunity for individual consideration, which is just common sense. And I cannot add other issues into my individual variance. I'm not the one who makes changes to the bylaws for Tapadera. I understand that there's some tension with the Fraser Valley Regional District and the council or the Strata Council and a rocky history there. But knowing that, I cannot offer an opinion on events that took place without my attendance. And there seems to be little consistency as to what actually happened several years ago when I listened to both sides of that story from people who are present during the meetings. With all the research I did uncover a concern about fire safety in holiday parks, but it has nothing to do with the Ramada. It's to do with the encouraged planting of cedar hedges. The hedges are considered landscaping and not regulated by structures, not regulated like structures and buildings are. My variance permit is not related to cedar hedges. I am working on having the ones, however, I'm working on having the ones on the left and the right-hand side of our lot replaced with a fire-resistant fencing or barrier. I want to share, and here I want to share some snippets of my correspondence with the Office of the Fire Commissioner and Building and Safety Standards, Ministry of Attorney General, and Minister responsible for housing in the province of BC. In an email, I asked the Fire Commissioner's office if there was any information on Ramadas and increased fire risk. Here's part of that reply. At first, he said the BC Fire Code does not regulate the installation of Ramadas or pergolas. Usually they are considered part of landscaping. And then he went on to say, I'm not aware of any fire safety studies or issues with them. Normally it's an inappropriate activity involving the use of an open flame that would cause one to burn down. I asked the same question again with more detail, and here's part of the following reply. Building is a defined term in the BC Building Code, and local governments can adopt bylaws that allow them to regulate buildings and structures captured by the definition of building in their jurisdiction. He then forwarded our email to a colleague in the Building and Safety Standards, Ministry of Attorney General, Minister responsible for housing in the province of BC. Here is all of that email reply to both of us. He said, we cannot comment on the municipal setbacks required as they do not relate to the BC Building Code. The BC Building Code does require minimum distances between buildings and lot lines between 2 buildings to prevent the spread of fire from one building to another. So this is common sense. Where minimum distances are not met, the code requires non-combustible cladding, siding, or sometimes non-combustible wall construction, such as a steel or concrete to minimize the spread of fire or the risk of fire spread. Aluminum is not typically considered non-combustible as it does not typically meet the code required tests for non-combustibility. Now I want to pause in the email here and explain that. In their code required test, aluminum melts. And if you were using it as a firewall between 2 apartment buildings or condos or duplex, if it melted, it would not contain the fire. That's why it's not used. Then he goes on to say in the email, all that stated, the code exempts some small accessory structures if they do not present a risk. The determination of such a risk is left to the owner and the authority having jurisdiction. In August 2020, the ICC, International Code Council, presented a paper on combustibility of aluminum. The summary is, aluminum, just like many comparable metals, is not combustible in any general application other than when it is specifically made to be. So that would be in the case of an alloy, I suppose. And scientifically backed information is often slower to propagate the public sphere, contributing to erroneous perceptions regarding aluminum's combustibility. So again, in conclusion, my Ramada is not a fire risk. My aluminum Ramada is not a fire risk, and the variance application should be accepted. When exposed to fire directly, aluminum can melt at 1,112 to 1,220 Fahrenheit, but it doesn't burn. If aluminum were combustible, then there would be no aluminum cookware. When we address the point that a Ramada construction will increase the workload of the Fraser Valley Regional District and cause others to apply for similar setback considerations, I come to the following rebuttal. I do see that there is an ongoing issue between the Fraser Valley and Tapadera states, and this could be a problem that extends to other holiday parks to do with the setback issue. I'm sympathetic in regards to all that entails on both sides. I cannot be responsible, nor do I see how this bias should affect the variance application, as it is a consideration for an individual application. The Fraser Valley Regional District says the consistency between the lots is essential, and I also do not see this as an issue. The lots in Tapadera Estates are consistent already. And I'd like to just quickly add in here, in May, probably about 2 weeks ago, we had a fire very close to us. It was about 5 kilometers away, and it got to about 10 hectares. And if that fire had come our direction instead of going the other way, it went actually just opposite away from us. If there had been sparks, our aluminum Ramada would have stopped the roof of my RV from catching on fire. I hope everybody got the one-page handout that elaborates where I base my findings. I had sent links to make sure you could all see that. And that's it. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Garay. And I'll look to directors for any questions or comments.
Director Bales?
Go ahead, Director Bales.
Well, I just wondered, I'd like to hear from staff on this one. Normally, quite often there'd be letters of support or opposed. I don't see any of those. So there are standards set by the strata as well. So I was wondering if the staff could address those.
Be pleased to, through the chair. We've not received any expressions of support or concern from neighbors, but that isn't surprising at this point. Following the committee meeting, we would send out our notification to lot owners within a 30-meter radius and also the Strata Council for comment. And those comments would be brought to the board for consideration.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Danilus. Director Bales, did you have anything else to add?
Oh, just further comment on how it might affect the neighbors and the proximity.
Yeah. Sure. Is that, you're asking of staff, Director Bales?
Sorry, I'm muted. Yes, of staff, please. And also the standards of the strata as well.
Mr. Danilus?
We'll have an opportunity to hear from neighbors directly once we send out our mail out to see how neighbors would react to the reduction in the separation. The staff perspective on this variance is that we're not in a position at this point to evaluate the use of aluminum and how it performs under fire circumstances. I appreciate the position that Ms. Gray is in. She's in this position because a neighbor built a shed on a neighboring lot too close to their lot line, which means that the proposed ramada doesn't meet the separation to the shed on the adjacent lot. We'd very much like to see if the Strata Council could get involved in that situation and see if that shed could be moved. That's one potential outcome. We are concerned about fire separations generally in campground holiday parks because these kinds of developments are under a lot of pressure for construction. More often we see people residing in RVs or living in park model trailers or spending considerable parts of the year living in them. That's not the original intention of the development. It was meant to be a resort campground kind of use. But living in RVs, I think, puts pressure. People feel the limitations of living in RVs. They lack storage. Their roofs can leak over time. They look for ramadas. They look for to build sheds, decks, enclosed decks. So there's a pressure for this sort of incremental development in resort parks, and managing that kind of construction very much often which doesn't require a building permit. So we don't have that level of oversight. Managing fire separation standards and overall development standards on this lot these lots are a challenge, and that's not unique to Tapadera. And I definitely agree with Ms. Garay that Tapadera is a very good park, typically well run, very attractive. In many ways, it's a model campground holiday park, but it is subject to these to these forces of development. People residing in their RVs and experiencing the constraints and looking to expand the scope of construction on their lots. At the same time, they're very dense places. It can be hard to get fire equipment in there or to respond to fires within the lots and gain access. So we are concerned with fire separations. Again, not in a particular position to evaluate aluminum construction, but what we would like to see, we're very open-minded to alternative standards for Tapadera, but what we would like to see is a consistent approach at Tapadera so that we don't have, I think what we currently have, which is something of a patchwork of rules. There's the zoning bylaw rules and variances issued over time that apply to groups of lots and not other groups of lots. And it leads to overall to an inconsistent approach. And I hear all the time how difficult it is to understand what the rules at Tapadera are. And individual variances, I think, feed into that. And having a very clearly understandable, consistent set of rules, in my view, is really important in these places that are dense lots subject to these kinds of unregulated building pressures. So that's an additional area of concern, and can speak to experience. It's a real challenge in trying to manage this construction in campground holiday parks. So it may well be that the board should consider reduced setbacks and look at fire ratings of aluminum structures and how they perform during fires. And that may well be a very good reason for reducing setbacks. The staff view would be, let's do it on a park-wide basis, not on individual lots or in one-off circumstances.
Good, thank you, Mr. Danilus. Director Bales, did you have anything further to add?
I guess I've heard a lot of complaints from Tapadera about similar issues, and I'm just feeling like we need some consistency, and the Strata also has their standards, so that's another issue. I guess that's all I'll say right now, other than setbacks also provide access, and when you're in a tight neighborhood, that it can be important to the neighbors. So we haven't heard from any neighbors, but that's because they haven't had the mail out yet. So anyway,
Good.
I guess that's it.
Thank you, Director Bales. Director Davidson, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Chair. Just reading the staff report, and perhaps jumping the gun because this is further on in the agenda, but there is a section on the zoning amendment for Tapadera Estates, and I'm just curious, just a question through to staff, and I guess Ms. Garay, is there been any position taken on this by the council for Tapadera? It just seems that their voice is important to this whole thing, and I'm just curious, have we heard anything from them on this kind of subject? Thank you.
Can I add something in here?
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Garay.
I know that the president of the council has been heavily involved. He has told me that he's open and willing to talk on the issue. And I know that there was some events that happened in the past that have put a bad taste in everybody's mouth, but I can't as an individual deal with that. It's beyond me, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ms. Gray. I think from what I'm hearing from you is you're concerned that past history is flavoring the staff's reaction to your variance. I would certainly not consider that likely. I think our staff approaches everything as from a good governance perspective, and that's pretty much the limit of our responsibility. Staff, did you want to comment on Director Davidson's question?
Thank you, Chair. I haven't had any input yet from the Strata Council. We'll be sending them a referral after the meeting today, following our normal practice, and then we'll know what their specific feedback and comments are. If I may speak to events in past years, but at the staff level, we're quite open-minded to different rule changes for Tapadera Estates. We've heard really good arguments that the existing rules aren't serving a lot of people well. We had an extended conversation with the various strata councils at Tapadera. There's certainly no ill will on the part of staff towards Tapadera. It's an excellent development in many respects. And I personally spent a fair bit of time out there at meetings with people. So I can assure Ms. Garay that there's certainly no ill feelings or biases or negative perceptions about Tapadera. What I have observed is that the existing set of rules causes confusion and people struggle to understand what the rules are on different sites. And people are looking for consistency. There are a variety of opinions in Tapadera. And I think that's hindered owners from coming to a consensus about what kind of zoning amendments, what kinds of rule changes would benefit the development. The strata convened a committee that we worked with quite extensively and I thought amicably, and the committee developed a very strong recommendation that we're certainly prepared to move ahead with. Unfortunately, it just didn't gather the support required among strata lot owners and wasn't able to move forward from that perspective. But certainly the door's not closed from our perspective. We'd be happy to work with the strata or with groups of residents on potential rule changes, especially if they would apply broadly in the development and benefit a number of people.
Good, thank you, Mr. Danilus. Directors, any other questions or comments?
Dixon.
Director Dixon, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly understand the fire safety aspect, and I'm just trying to look at this. Is there no way that this RV could be covered and still be within the existing bylaws?
We had worked with the drawer and the engineer to try and get a drawing that was as close to that as we could. And it didn't seem to make any difference. We can't give the full amount, but we can get pretty close to it. The drawing that I submitted was the original one that had been approved by the city engineer, but there's other drawings that I have in my possession that give a little bit more room. We're talking about between the roof line of the Ramada and the roof line of the shed. Right. That's where the problem comes in. We're not talking about the actual, if you went across on the ground level.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Dixon. Further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah, Director Enger, please.
Just an observation, and I know it's early because the Strata Council hasn't got back, and but from our from Mr. Danilus's words, I would suggest that this person should not be penalized if it is indeed the the shed next door that is not in compliance and causing the issue. So from my limited understanding of the issue, I would look for more clarity with the Strata Council and what they decide to do about that. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Director Engar. On my, personally, my view of this is I certainly sympathize, Ms. Gray, with the difficult situation you find yourself in. I also understand the argument presented by staff that if we continue to approach these applications on a case-by-case individual basis, that it could be perceived as open season and have all these problems with inconsistencies and unfairness, and we award one variance, we don't award another variance. They would be much better if the whole complex met a certain standard, and it would simplify everyone's lives, and people would be able to move forward with a sense of assuredness, I think. So those are my comments, and we do thank you, Ms. Gray, for presenting to us today, and we'll deal with this later on in our agenda.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'd just like to add in, there is other paperwork. Obviously, I couldn't go through all of it in the 10 minutes, but there is other paperwork that has been provided for you to peruse. Thank you very much.
Thank you again. Ms. Kinnaman.
Thank you. So we now move to item 4.3, which is a bylaw enforcement survey presentation by Louise Hinton and Teresa Alexander from our Building and Bylaw Department.
Afternoon, everybody.
And Ms. Alexander.
Miss Alexander's away this afternoon. Her son is graduating.
Oh, well, that's great.
So I will be doing it all by my lonesome. I'm just going to share my screen here. Just give me 1 second. Hopefully everybody can see that.
Looking good.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Dickey and Electoral Area Directors. I'm here to provide you an update on our bylaw enforcement policy project. As you know, our bylaw department recently sent out a survey to all the EA directors for your input on your priorities and your values for bylaw enforcement. We only received the survey results on Tuesday, so today's presentation will just provide some very preliminary or initial key findings that we have observed in the data. A full report of the summarized responses that provides a more comprehensive review of the survey findings will be provided to the committee at July's meeting in a month's time. Our objective is to have input from the committee to help us build a policy for our bylaw department, one that reflects the values and priorities of the diverse electoral area communities that our department serves. This policy will help provide more department efficiency, improve department structure, help allocate our current resources, reduce our liability, and provide clear expectations to help guide the daily procedural decisions. One second. 1 second here. Just a second here. Okay, here we go. Today we are providing a brief update on where we are with our project, what's been completed thus far, and what the next steps in the process are. We are currently on step 2, so today I'm going to share some preliminary key findings from the director's survey. Then we will complete the development of the public survey, which is in its final stages, and plan to go live on the website next week. Following that, we will provide a presentation to the committee with a full overview of the values discovered in the initial stages of the project and a second director survey regarding preferred policy options for consideration. As you can see in the project work plan, we are about halfway through, and based on the above schedule, we should have a draft policy for the committee's consideration later this fall. Some of the preliminary observations we noted looking through the results of the director's survey found 5 key areas of focus. The director's views on current priorities, officers' approach and management, and overall enforcement processes, values, and what the overall perception of bylaw department is. When looking at the survey results, overall, there is a really good consensus among the area directors that a priority-based system needs to be developed to help allocate resources and prioritize bylaw files based on a number of different factors. Those range from file type, community urgency, past efforts, and health and safety considerations. There are a number of file types the majority of the directors felt should be categorized as being high or of medium priority. Looking at the survey responses regarding our current overall approach to bylaw enforcement versus what would be a more ideal approach, we learned that overall the directors for the most part felt that our current approach to enforcement is fairly balanced but leaning a little bit to the softer side, while the most ideal approach to enforcement would see our response remaining balanced but less soft and a little more direct. For example, the survey showed that EA directors would like to see increased enforcement for construction of habitable spaces. There was a very clear consensus among the directors in seeing increased escalation in enforcement efforts on these types of structures. Also, directors generally agreed that there needs to be consideration given for property owners who encounter hardships on a case-by-case basis when determining appropriate enforcement efforts. And the bylaw officers need to have discretion to reduce and delay escalation of enforcement or ticketing and on the timelines of compliance where hardship issues arise. The process findings in the survey showed a relative variation in responses around the amount of time that should be given to a property owner to take meaningful action to resolve their bylaw infractions on their property before officers would move towards an escalation of enforcement with ticketing. These were the most visible responses provided in the survey when looking at what principles should guide our bylaw staff in both the complaints process and separately in the enforcement process. These here on the slide are provided in order of strongest support 1 through 5. There was no clear consensus about public perception of our bylaw enforcement service, other than the EA directors felt that the public perception of bylaw enforcement in the FERD was largely dependent on a person's previous personal interactions with the department. Our next step in the process is the development of the public survey. This survey draft is in its initial final stages and should be live on the website by next week. This survey will be live for about 3 weeks, providing an opportunity for members of the EA communities to provide some general comments, opinions, and general values regarding FERD bylaw enforcement. We'll get it out through community groups, social media, a media release, and then we'll ask you to circulate it to your email distribution list. When the public survey is concluded, we will provide another update to the committee with the public survey results and preferred policy options, and a presentation to review the overall findings regarding values and priorities before moving ahead to writing a draft policy and procedure for the committee's review this early fall. Thank you to the committee for your time today, and ask if there's any questions.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Hinton. Directors, any comments, questions?
Bales?
Davidson?
Director Bales and then Director Davidson.
Okay, I guess I tried to fill out the form, but I got stuck on a question that I felt like I couldn't honestly answer. So it wouldn't let me move forward. And I was wondering for the public forum whether there could be an adjustment for that, because I didn't feel like I wanted to answer and not be honest in the answer. So I tried moving to the next page, but it wouldn't let me. So I just, in lieu of not giving an honest answer, I just didn't finish filling it out. So I find, but it did give me a bit of a window on how difficult it is for bylaw enforcers. I mean, there are mitigation factors and a lot of variables that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And like, it wasn't a question of I don't know, it was more of a question for me. It depends on certain variables sometimes. And I really realized what a difficult job that you have to do on a day-to-day basis. So I just wondered if we can adjust the survey for the public so that if there's an answer, they don't feel like they can answer honestly, that they have a place to comment on it, or that they can move forward with the survey without getting stuck. So that would be my comment for now.
Good. Thank you, Director Bales. Staff, I'm not sure if you'd like to give your view of this concern.
Sure. I'm not sure if Graham or Louise can speak to that, but I would suspect that an additional answer of prefer not to answer or unable to answer is something that could probably be amended within the survey, but I'll turn that over to Graham and Louise.
We can certainly make that change. That's not a problem at all. Perhaps we could also follow up with Director Bales and we could walk through the survey and have you fill out the questions that you wish to fill out and certainly leave the rest. I know that our online survey didn't give you that option, but perhaps if we go over it together or if we print you out a paper copy for you to mark up, maybe that's a way we could proceed as well and still get your views included in the survey results.
Good, thank you, Mr. Danilus. Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. So for me, the survey, let me rewind a little bit. If I was to summarize, as I sit here today, my own kind of views on bylaw enforcement is that, I firmly believe we want reactive, not proactive, and that, live and let live unless somebody's made a complaint. But if that complaint is indeed valid, then that complainant has a, in my view anyway, a reasonable expectation that it gets resolved. And that's kind of my core belief coming into this. And I was struggling a bit to align that with the survey that was presented. But as it relates to going forward, perhaps we could get a preview of the public-facing survey before it goes out and have an opportunity to comment on it. That would be my preference going forward. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Director Davidson. Other directors?
Adamson.
Director Adamson, go ahead.
Yeah, I too, when I was doing the survey, I found there was places that I couldn't answer because it depends, like a lot of them was, well, it would be okay if it was this situation, but like that. So I agree with Director Bales on that. It was a bit hard to answer. I think that going from the complaint driven is the way we've done it before in the past, and it seems to be working good. And I know that the bylaw people have a really tough time with it because they get people telling them, that place is a mess. And then you got this guy saying, well, this is my life, right? So it's really complicated. But I mean, I think our staff does an excellent job. So that's it.
Good, thank you, Director Adamson. Other comments? I would just maybe say maybe in answer to Director Davidson's concerns that the complainant's concerns be resolved. In my experience with bylaw enforcement, if people are wanting to cooperate with their community and keep their neighbors happy, things work very well. If they choose not to do that, and it goes outside of the hands of the regional district, becomes an issue with our court system. And then things get very expensive and very unwieldy and very difficult. And that is where the problem typically arises. Any other comments? Seeing none, to thank Ms. Hinton for a nice report to us and look forward to this file moving forward. I'll turn things back to our CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next item is 5.1. We have the draft Electoral Area Services Committee meeting minutes of May the 6th, 2021.
For a motion.
Adamson move.
And second, Director Adamson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, contrary, motion carries.
6.1, we have the 2021 UBCM meeting requests. This is an information item just to advise each of you of the upcoming deadlines. I did want to also just note that from our Regional and Corporate Services Committee meeting this morning, there was discussion about the 2 LMLGA resolutions that were supported and would be going forward to UBCM, and the direction from that committee for us to schedule meetings for the chair of the board with the appropriate ministries related to those 2 resolutions. There was also agreement for myself to work with the district, now the City of Mission's CAO on a resolution, an issue with respect to Highway 7 and traffic on Highway 7 and improvements on Highway 7. So I will certainly be working with them on that. They may take the lead on that subject, but happy to discuss any other items or offline, as we always do with each of you if there are meetings to be scheduled. And as you know, this is an online event again this year, so certainly these meetings take on a slightly different flavor than they have in the past.
Good, thank you, Ms. Kinnaman. Any comments on this information item?
Dixon.
Director Dixon.
I just want to clarify, when I read the report in the agenda, it says that FERD Legislative Services Department is going to contact us. Do you want us to wait for that?
It's fine either way, through the chair to Director Dixon. It's fine either way. In the past, I don't know that we've even necessarily put this item as an agenda item, but we just wanted to make sure that each of you had plenty of time to note the dates and start thinking about what you might want to book for your communities.
Okay, thank you.
Good, thank you, Director Dixon. Any further discussion? We'll move to the next item.
6.2, we have the FERD Emergency Management Program Service Area Merger and Establishment Bylaw number 1606, and there is a motion for your consideration.
Looking for a mover.
Adamson.
Director Adamson moves, second Director Raymond. Discussion.
Dixon.
Director Dixon.
Thank you. So if I'm reading this correctly, whatever we have in our specific area balances right now will still remain for those areas. What happens when we're all merged together?
Sure, through the chair to Director Dixon, and certainly Ms. Lonsborough can speak to that. As you know, budgeted dollars that are within a service area have to stay within a service area. And so this bylaw simply streamlines all of the existing bylaws into one. However, there are these remaining amounts that would have to be spent on these kinds of activities within that service area. So depending on what is proposed into the future, these are funds that could be drawn on for that explicit purpose. They won't be pooled into one big fund. For example, electoral area H's funds would not be spent in electoral area A. But maybe Ms. Lonsborough wants to speak to that.
Thank you. Ms. Kinnaman, you explained it quite well. We will keep those funds segregated on our books for each relevant electoral area. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Ms. Lonsborough.
May I have a follow-up? Because I apparently am struggling with this, I think. So I mean, I'm understanding that the balances that I'm reading right now in this budget of 28,000 more or less for area E and H is right now, and that will remain there. But moving forward, there will still be funds. Well, they're not coming out of an area H emergency whatever fund and emergency management funds. shown under, I guess, one big budget, but within that one large budget, will they still be separated out? Does that make sense?
Yeah, Ms. Lounsborough, did you want to speak to that?
Certainly, Chair Dickey. Through the chair to Director Dixon, they will be taxed as one large amount going forward. So we will just have one amalgamated budget going forward. But for the historical balances, we will keep them separated.
If I can further add to that, I think maybe what the concern is, and I'm intuiting this a little bit, but you know, in terms of how our emergency management activities going to be managed, given that each electoral area is contributing a different amount. And I think one of the criticisms from the AGLG was that we have one emergency management function, and so which you're all contributing towards, and yet we had all of these varying different bylaws. And so the expectation from the audit was that we would have one consistent bylaw, and certainly we have staff that provide emergency management support and activities in all of your areas, in some areas more than others at 1 year, and you know, it might be another area the following year, but it would be managed very similarly to any other electoral area wide service that we have. Is that a fair assessment, Kelly?
Yes, that is a fair assessment.
Good. Thank you, staff. Director Dixon, does that answer your concerns?
Yes, I understand that. So, thank you.
I think if I'm reading this correctly, Director Dixon is worrying about these funds which are within electoral area H at this time and how they'll be expended in the future on electoral area H emergency projects. Is that correct?
That was it, but it sounds like they may not be specifically. It'll be electoral area
wide
projects, not the ones that exist right now. Those ones I understand will remain separate. It's going down the road where it becomes an electoral area wide service where it not necessarily spent in area H. I believe that's what I just heard. It'll be like the other electoral area wide services.
Yeah.
Which I think, if I may, I think that it really was functioning as an electoral area wide service, but it wasn't set up as an electoral area wide service, if that makes sense. So, you know, if electoral area H had $15,000 that was put towards emergency management, we weren't necessarily spending $15,000 in 2015, but we might spend $30,000 in 2016, just as an example, because it's an electoral area wide function. But so that was just a criticism. It is really just a housekeeping item, really, because the whole, from an operational perspective, nothing is changing.
Okay.
Good. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Director Dixon. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
7.1, we have the 2021 grant and aid request for the Cultus Lake Aquatic Stewardship Society in electoral area H.
Move Dixon.
Director Dixon, second. Director
Adamson.
Any discussion?
Dixon.
Go ahead, Director Dixon.
I'm happy to support this. This is another part of class, Cultus Lake Aquatic Steward Society, really working hard to keep track of the health of the lake and doing what they can to monitor it. So I'm happy to see it.
Thank you, Director Dixon. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
7.2, we have the 2021 grant and aid request for the Chilliwack River Valley Volunteer Fire Department in electoral area E.
So moved.
Director Engar moves. Second, Director Adamson. Discussion.
Yes, briefly, Chair.
Director Engar.
Yes, it's an amazing time that we've been experiencing, and evidently the price of everything is going up, including PPE equipment and whatnot. So happy to support our fire department who does such great work out here.
Thank you, Director Engar. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, contrary, motion carries.
So moving to section 8 in the agenda, as we mentioned at the outset, we were varying the order. So we will start with 8.2, which is the FBRD Water Supply Systems Regulations, Fees and Charges Establishment Bylaw number 1631.
Okay, you need a motion.
I'll move, but I'd like to speak to it later.
Yeah, Director Raymond moves, second.
Second, Adamson.
Director Adamson, discussion, Director Raymond.
Thank you. I was reading through and where it comes into, see, it was on page 44, section A, about the fines that are being levied if they're not following in compliance, say when there is a water restriction put on. I'm assuming there's warnings that go out ahead of time. And I am also finding $200 for each offense for in my area somewhat high. I would prefer it to be along the same lines as what Yale's is, which is $25, not more than $500. If they continue with this, then I can see carrying it on up higher, but I don't think I can accept that the way it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Raymond. So we'll look to staff for an explanation.
Sure, I can speak to that. So through the chair to Director Raymond, yeah, what we are proposing here in the staff report is to standardize the fine structure from minimum $25 in some areas up to a minimum of $200 across the board. With that being said, we did do a bit of digging around on our end. And as long as I've been here, and actually as long as Tarek Islam has been at the FBRD, we don't have any recollection or any record of us actually having issued a fine for one of these offenses. So we definitely work on a we try and achieve voluntary compliance first, and we do try and work with people before we resort to implementing fines. And the fact that that we haven't ever implemented one or given out one of these fines in the last 17 years kind of speaks to that point.
Thank you, Mr. Chan. Director Raymond, did you have anything to add?
Well, I can understand that, but I can also see with the changes in the environment that we're having and the heat temperature up here in Boston Bar that we get, that this could pose a problem to a lot of my residents if it's a $200 fine for not obeying by that bylaw. I'm having a real issue with that one.
Thank you, Director Raymond.
Adamson.
Director Adamson, go ahead.
I kind of agree with Director Raymond. Obviously, the $25 is enough deterrent in Yale. And since we've never had to give out one. So maybe you should bring them all to 25. Do it that way, level it that way instead of going up.
Okay, thank you, Director Adamson. Further discussion.
Davidson?
Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. Just my own comments on that point. I kind of lean the other way. Water is a serious matter. A $25 is not a serious penalty. But I think by any stretch, and it's gonna be one of the challenges of trying to standardize across the entire region. But in this area, if it's going to be a $25 penalty, you might as well not have any penalty. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Davidson.
Director Engar.
Director Engar, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I know there's always a issue attached to these things, relations, I should say. And typically if it feels to the community like it's a heavy-handed approach, those things linger for years. That's been my observation. So I would err on the side of a low first offense, and with a nod to immediately letting them know that the second offense is considerably higher.
Mm-hmm.
Speak softly and carry a big stick.
Thank you, Director Engar. Director, anyone that hasn't spoken yet? Seeing none, Director Raymond, go ahead.
I agree with what Director Engar is saying. And as for the $200 and coming down with a heavy stick, when I have a 65 to 70% unemployment rate in my town, if they can't pay that $200, what then? They get cut off in their water?
Director or Mr. Chan, did you want to speak to that? Sterling, I think.
Sorry, my apologies.
You're doing fine.
No, there's a procedure that's outlined in our water conservation bylaw that on basically how that would be escalated. So it, eventually it could lead to, some of these water being taken or being cut off, but there's a lot of steps that would have to happen between, the first notification of that offense and the warnings until we get to that point. So we would definitely give people every opportunity to work with us before we would ever want to go there.
Good. Thank you. Mr. Chan, go ahead, Director Raymond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If this is written into the bylaw or that the Yale water system bylaw requires a fine of not less than 25, and not more than 500, why can it not be written in that way for Boston Bar?
Mr. Chan, once again.
Through the chair, we certainly could, we could change it from 25 to 500. The idea and the intent behind this bylaw was to consolidate the regulations and make it level across the board. We were trying to cut down on the administrative burden of having 12 separate water bylaws. And just, I guess, one quick point of clarification is that the current fine structure in Boston Bar is the minimum $200. So it was only the Yale water system that was non-standardized in this case.
Exactly. So there is a change in it, and there is a difference in it. So I can't see where it'd be a big issue to put Boston Bars the same as Yale.
Okay, thank you.
Adamson.
Director Adamson.
It seems to me that if nobody's breaking this law, why are we making laws like giving penalties to something that's never happened? Right? Mr. Chan said so himself, 17 years, nobody's done this. And we're making penalties for it. Probably next 17, nobody will do it either, right? Like it's sometimes rules are just get carried away.
Okay, thank you, Director Adamson. So do directors want to give this a rest for a month and talk to staff and see whether a resolution can be made, or do you want to amend the staff report? Go ahead, Director Raymond.
If I may, as it stands right now, I cannot support it. So I'd like to work with staff on it a little longer. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Raymond. So is that a motion to defer, or?
I'll make a motion to defer, yes.
Second, Adams.
Okay, on the motion to defer. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Contrary? Motion carries.
So if I could just get some clarification or some thumbs up from electoral area directors. So in terms of expectations, you would like engineering and utility staff to connect with each of you directly to talk further about this particular bylaw and any of the concerns or questions that you have with respect to it. Is that a thumbs up from everyone? That's what we're hoping to achieve through the referral.
If I may, Mr. Chair, it
Go ahead, Director Raymond.
the only one that needs discussion is with me. The rest seems to have been okay with it. So yeah, I need that discussion to happen.
Good, thank you, Director Raymond. So this is a very encompassing bylaw. There's a lot of things that are being standardized. So this is a very small item. in comparison with the whole bylaw. So I think this is still a very successful move forward, but we just have a small item that we need to think about. And as long as staff don't feel it's very important to deal with at this moment, we'll just defer for a month. Mr. Chan, would you like to respond to that?
Certainly. I'd be happy to continue the conversation with Director Raymond after this meeting. I just wanted to, I guess, raise the one point because from the conversation that's been going back and forth, I just wanted to make sure that all the directors are clear that the only change that is proposed by this bylaw would be standardize the penalty for the water system to make it in line with the penalty that already exists for the other 11 water systems.
Yeah, no, I think you've made a good argument for that, Mr. Chan. We recognize the inconsistency, and I'm sure we can sort this out over the next month. So thank you. And have we voted on this, Ms.?
We did, Mr. Chair. I just wanted that clarity in terms of expectations. So now we can move to item 8.1, which is the FVRD Hatzick Prairie Water System Service Area Amendment Bylaw number 1561.
Good, thank you. We're looking for a motion.
Davidson?
Move Director Davidson, second.
Adamson.
Director Adamson, discussion, Director Davidson. I think you're muted, Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. So this does relate to the previous item on the agenda in a big way. If I was to summarize or sort of communicate concerns on it, is that until we have a better understanding of our aquifer, the capacities of it, and how climate change will impact it, we were looking for assurances that any additional connections to the water system would, for now, at any rate, be for domestic use only and being the best compromise. The previous item being deferred back carries with it, unfortunately, the need to defer this item as well, in my opinion. So that's what I would like to do, is move that this be, and help me here if it's deferred or referred. I assume it's deferred until we have 8.2 back on the agenda again. That makes sense.
So that would be a motion to defer, and we need a second.
Second,
I set Bales as well.
Okay, Director Bales seconds. So on the motion on deferral, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Contrary, motion carries. Just a question through to staff. Is this going to cause any difficulty for the people that are involved in that service establishment?
Through the chair to Director Dickey. Yes, there are some property owners on that water system who are quite keen to be connected to the system and are waiting for this bylaw to go through. They are well aware of the challenges that we're facing right now, and so far they've been kind of standing pat and waiting. But certainly.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chan. So you're okay with that, Director Davidson?
Thank you, Chair. I honestly don't see an alternative. I think that this water bylaw is a broad topic, and if we're referring it back or deferring it back so that people can have a longer discussion or a closer look at it, I'm just concerned where it may go, and I don't see an alternative at this time. So yes, unfortunately, I am okay with it. Thank you.
Okay, then. Thank you, Director Davidson. Turning things back to our CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So now we move to section 9, which is 9.1. We have development variance permit 2021-09 to vary visual clearance requirements at 244 First Ave, Electoral Area H.
Move Dixon.
Move Director Dixon, second
Adamson,
Director Adamson. Discussion.
Dixon,
Director Dixon, go ahead.
I recognize that Cultus Lake Park Board has indicated that they would like to support this variance, as have several of the neighbors with the submissions and things like that. And just through, I guess, you to staff, just confirming that this really isn't, I guess, setting precedents or standard for a safety issue. They're trying to see around a corner.
Okay, through to staff. Thank you, Director Dixon.
I think Mr. Daniluz is just getting set up here.
Thank you to Director Dixon through the chair. Variances in and of themselves don't set precedents that you're obliged to follow in the future. And so strictly speaking, I would say that the approval of this application doesn't set a precedence. Now, if you ask me, would the approval of this variance inform the expectations of other property owners who own property on these intersections and are subject to the 6-meter visual clearance triangle? I would say yes, absolutely. And I think we could anticipate further variances, similar variances on the future.
Thank you, Mr. Daniluz. Director Dixon, is there?
No, that's fine. And it looks like Cultus Lake Park Board is wanting to consider other changes as well down the road. So as long as, I think we have to each one individually, and we'll see what happens. So.
Good. Thank you, Director Dixon. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
9.2, we have development variance permit 2021-11 to reduce setbacks for a ramada at lot 134-14600 Morris Valley Road in Electoral Area C.
Okay, looking for a motion.
Bales?
Move Director Bales, second
Adamson,
Director Adamson. Discussion.
I'm willing to go forward with the staff recommendation on this one. There's been a lot of agrimony coming from this community, so there's a lot of division, and unless we need to get that resolved, and I just think it will start a domino effect as far as the neighbors and their. Yeah, it needs to be resolved within the strata too. So
Good.
I will go with.
Thank you, Director Bales. Any further discussion?
Dixon, I just have a question.
Oh yeah, Director Dixon, go ahead.
Thank you. So we're moving the staff recommendation to refuse this, I'm assuming. How does it work then? If there would FERD then wait for Tapadera to connect with them around sort of what type of arrangements they'd like to see within their development? Like,
Okay, Mr. Daniluz, did you want to respond to that?
Thank you, Chair. We could certainly reach out to the Strata Council at Tapadera again and continue a conversation that's been ongoing, I'd say, for a few years. It's gone silent over the last year or so when the Tapadera community, I think, they couldn't achieve the necessary level of support within the community to move forward with changes to the zoning bylaw that would change the rules for some kinds of development at Tapadera. But certainly we could follow up with them and see if there's been any change. There is a new Strata Council. They may have new approaches or ways to go about it. So we wouldn't have to be passive here and sit back and wait. If that's the desire, we would certainly reach out.
thank you.
Good, thank you, Director Dixon. So is that the request of the committee that we do approach the Strata Council at Tapadera about making some changes in their regulations? Director Bales, did you have a position on that?
Well, I think we're going to have a standardized bylaw on this coming up too. But also, it's really hard to change strata bylaws because you need such a large percentage to make the changes. It's difficult for sure. I would certainly support ongoing dialogue with the strata board. It does tend to change every few years, so that's difficult as well. So, but you need the consensus within the community to get those changes as well. So that hasn't happened. So you have to go with that as it is right now.
Okay, so Director Bales, as the director for the area, your position is that you don't feel that staff need to approach the Strata Council at this point?
No, I wasn't saying that. I was actually, I mean, we need to keep ongoing dialogue, although there are some standardizations that are coming up across the board in the bylaw. So that inform all the similar parks of this nature. So, but we need to continue dialogue with all the stratas basically on an ongoing basis and see if they're willing to make changes. And if not, I think it causes too much agrimony within a community when you don't have a standard approach.
Okay, thank you, Director Bales. So staff, do you have sufficient direction as to move ahead or?
Director Raymond had a question.
Okay, Director Raymond, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if it would be more advantageous rather, because I didn't hear Mr. Danilowitz say they were going to go in there and talk about changing their bylaws. I don't think we should go in there with the attitude that we want them to change their bylaws. I think what we should be doing in this case is going in to find out what their stance in their community is towards this certain one and leave that position up to them, and then they can get back to us. And that would help us to reply. But I think we would be a little hard pressed to go in there and try and get them to change some of their bylaws. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Raymond.
Adamson.
Director Adamson.
Is it possible in the future that we get to a position where if you're building a strata, you have to follow our rules? You can't make up your own? I just wonder if that's possible.
We'll look to Mr. Danilowitz for a staff position on that.
Thank you, Chair. The strata corporations have, they form a council and they've got a right to establish their own bylaws and sets of rules, and those bylaws don't have to be consistent with ours. Now, of course, both sets of rules apply, and so the net effect is the most restrictive rules then carry the day. So it isn't possible for us to prevent stratas from adopting their own sets of rules, but we definitely want to be coordinating with stratas and look to see that where our rules are encourage consistent rules, and where we differ to try to work through that and see if there's opportunities to harmonize. And like Director Raymond suggested, it's not a matter for us to tell the stratas what sorts of bylaws they ought to have internally, but rather to see where we might be able to change our bylaws and whether there's support in the strata communities themselves to change our own bylaws. That's where things have broken down with Tapadera in the past, not move forward because there wasn't enough consensus among Tapadera owners about the kinds of rule changes they wanted FERD to make.
And if I could just further ask a question, just for Mr. Danilowicz's sake and for his staff's sake, I think that there isn't a whole lot of clarity right at this point, Mr. Chair, in terms of what is expected of staff going forward with respect to approaching the strata. So if we could either get a motion or some clearer direction, is it just simply that you want Mr. Danilowicz's team to reach out and again, remind them that the door is open to this conversation, or is there something else that's expected here?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kinnaman, for that direction. So looking to directors as to the way forward here. Director Raymond.
Yeah, what I was thinking about is for them, seeing how this has come forward to us and she's made her presentation to us, I think that it would be appropriate for staff to meet with the strata and to talk with them about it and get their vision on it, whether that community wants it or not. Not up to us to get that. It's up to them to get that, so that we can at least come back with an answer for this lady on whether it goes ahead or not. And I think that Graham can explain pretty well what our bylaws state and how it varies with theirs, but not going in to change theirs at all. I would just like to see it resolved in a more amicable way, which I think that Graham is doing that. And yeah, I'd just like him to meet with that, feel them out, see what that community feels like. Because if the community is all in favor of this, I would say go ahead with it. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Director Raymond. Did you want to make a motion to that effect?
Sure, whatever I said.
I'll second it.
Good. Staff, do you want a formal motion or have you got a sense of?
I think we got a sense of it. That's fine.
Okay, good. So any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Davidson?
Director Davidson, go ahead.
Sorry, just the question through to staff. How do you feel about essentially being asked to follow up, maintain communications with a strata? I mean, to me, if I extrapolate that out to any strata, it means that you're kind of reaching out. It's on you to maintain that that relationship, as opposed to just waiting for them to come to you with a problem when they're ready to come. So I'm just curious what staff's take on this kind of motion is, if they have any comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Davidson. Mr. Danilus.
Thank you, Chair. It's a good thing to have open dialogue and relationships with strata councils and major developments in our areas like Tapadera. And to a certain extent, we have that. For example, the new strata president in Tapadera was elected some months ago, and he very politely sent me an email to introduce himself, and we had a little bit of contact when he was elected. We haven't spoken further since then, but I would like to be able to maintain these relationships. I can't always do it proactively, simply because there's many of them and one of me. But in this instance, I'm very happy to reach out to the president and make sure that they see our referral when we send it to them after the meeting today, and offer to have a conversation with them about this variance application, but also about whether he feels that there's some prospect within the Tapadera community that they could come together and together request zoning amendments of the regional district. So I'm comfortable personally reaching out and having that conversation, but I do appreciate the consideration and the recognition that it is a challenge to try to maintain these connections across the electoral areas at all times. That's certainly the case. And I won't pretend that I am able to do that very well often.
Thank you, Mr. Danilus. I think we're aware there are limited resources on our side, so but we do appreciate that. Any further discussion?
So I see that Ms. Van Ness has she had to step out of the meeting briefly. Director Raymond, was that a separate motion that you had put forward, was just an amendment to this motion?
Director Raymond, how would you like to approach that? A separate motion?
I think we could do it as an amendment, I think.
Okay.
Okay, so Mr. Chair, it would then be the motion as amended. Well, first you'd need to vote on the amendment, and then as Director Raymond had presented, and then you'd need to vote on the main motion as amended.
Okay, thank you. So the amendment would be that staff meet with the Strata Council and discuss issues around changes to their regulation. And we do, no, Director Raymond says no.
Well,
Not
on this
changes.
application, right, on the referral, as Mr. Danilus mentioned.
Yeah, because I don't want them going in there telling them they have to change their regulation, that's all.
Right. We'll wordsmith that. We'll wordsmith
Okay,
that.
good. So we do have a mover and a seconder, or would we require to go through that again?
I see we have a mover and a seconder, Director Raymond and Director Adamson, a mover and seconder for the amendment.
On the amendment.
Yes.
So any further discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, all in favor?
No, just,
Uh-oh.
I just want, sorry.
Director
I just wanted
Bales.
to comment that I have no problem with this whatsoever, but it has been, there's a long history behind the strata. So I'm wishing good luck to resolve and move forward. And that's about it.
Thank you, Director Bales. So on the amendment, all those in favor? Contrary, motion carries. And on the main motion, all those in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
Perfect. Thank you. So now moving to 9.3, we have development variance permit 2021-13 to vary the requirements of accessory family residence use for the property located at 10205 Trombley Road in Electoral Area G.
Director Stobart, I knew you were there somewhere. Quiet. Any seconder? Director,
Adamson.
discussion.
Stobart.
Director Stobart, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'm in support of this. It's one of these ones that never made sense to me. It complies with ALR, it complies with zoning, and the fact that you could have your father come and work for you, but not your son and live on site, it's just ridiculous. And I don't know how it ended up that way. There must have been a reason at some time in the past, but hopefully we can see our way to including children in this down the road. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Stobart. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Motion carries.
9.4, we have development variance permit 2020-22 to vary the side lot line setback and distance to a residential dwelling to permit the reconstruction of 2 agricultural buildings at 9489 McMillan Road in Electoral Area D.
For a motion.
Dixon move the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Director
Second, Adamson.
Director Adamson, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
9.5, we have Fraser Valley Regional District Area D zoning amendment bylaw number 1632 to permit the placement of camping cabins at Camperland RV Resort 53730 Bridal Falls Road in Electoral Area D.
Motion.
Move Stobart.
Move Director Stobart, second Director Raymond, discussion. None, all in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
9.6, it's an information item, but staff are happy to answer any questions about cannabis regulations, survey findings, and next steps.
Okay, this is
Yes,
for information.
Director
Director Adamson?
Sorry.
Oh, somebody was.
Engar.
Director Engar, please go ahead, Director Engar.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just wondering, I remember some time back we had a meeting with the RCMP and their other fellows that came to the board. Excuse me. It was some type of an informal meeting in an afternoon, so it wasn't at the board level. But the RCMP at that time, my question was, how do we curtail the problems around medicinal grow ops in communities already? And the reply was, well, they're not going to change under these new rules and regulations. They're still going to be there. And unfortunately, that's the largest irritant I see in my community is these medicinal grow ops right within tight-knit communities. So I'm just wondering if as we proceed, I haven't spoken about this or heard too much about it as we've gone along here, but is there any movement on that? Have we seen any changes or any updates on that particular angle of things, what the federal government is doing with these medicinal grow licenses in, I understand they're not issuing any more, that's my understanding, but some little clarification would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Engar. Staff, Mr. Danilus, did you want to respond to that?
Thank you, Chair. I would. Yes, there has been no change in the federal legislation around the production of medical cannabis. We understand that they are working towards changes and that the desire of Health Canada is not to distinguish between medical licenses and commercial cannabis production, and that they would merge licenses into a single stream. I don't know the timeline for that work. It's very hard to get a read on what's happening within Health Canada. They're fairly distant from us, I find, but we understand that changes are afoot. Unfortunately, we know no more about it, and there's not much more I can tell you. What I can say, though, is that where the federal government through Health Canada issues a license for medical cannabis or otherwise, that local zoning bylaws have no ability to prevent that use. That the federal government has a paramountcy here, and if there's a federal license, then that activity is permitted on the land that's subject to the license.
So just follow up if I may.
Go ahead, Director Engar, yeah.
The question then begs, will our bylaws around noise and smell and light pollution, will those things have any concrete effect on the existing medical grow ops?
There's more work we need to do to understand our regulatory authority over things like noise and odor. I suspect that that we'll face limitations in our authority, but that doesn't mean that there aren't approaches that we can take that could have some effect in regulating community impacts from federally approved cannabis production facilities. I don't have the answers for you today. It's one of the central questions, I think, for us to resolve as we move ahead with regulating cannabis, what our authority is, what its limitations are, and how we can best, what the best opportunities that we have for effectively regulating cannabis. I don't have any hesitancy around zoning provisions. If we establish things like setbacks, then those would apply where federal licenses are given. Now, existing licenses and existing operations that predate zoning regulations would be grandfathered. And so there are all kinds of exceptions to the rule, if you will, when it comes to cannabis, because we share jurisdiction with the province and with the federal government. And we are the lowest member, if you will, on the team. And our regulations, of course, are subservient to federal and provincial. So that's one of the challenges we face in being effective in this arena. And we do want to provide you with much better advice going forward, but I don't have the answers today.
Thank you for that. Just one quick observation I think would be helpful for yourself to know, Mr. Danilus, is my community, for instance, when we talk about the cannabis survey that was done, their expectation is on seeing that we will be able to mitigate noise and smell and light pollution, those kinds of things. They're not seeing the larger picture. They're working under the assumption that we actually will have teeth in our bylaws and we'll have the final say. So I'm going to be actively talking with more people and trying to mitigate or minimize, I should say, their expectations somewhat, so that we're not between a rock and a hard place of taking on the burden of trying to do things that we are unable to do. So just to give you a heads up, I thought I'd share that as well. Thanks.
Good. Thank you, Director Engar. Any further discussion? This is just an information item, so we can move on to our next item. Ms. Kinnaman, please.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So 9.7, we have Harrison Mills Neighborhood Plan Funding and Request for Proposals Contract. There is a motion for your consideration.
Thank you. Looking for a
Bales.
Director Bales. We have three options to choose from in the way of a motion, Director Bales.
Right there.
There's a staff recommendation that.
Yeah, I was going with the staff recommendation.
Okay.
And Yeah, so I did have,
So we'll look for a seconder first.
yeah, okay.
Seconder, Director Raymond. Okay, discussion, Director Bales.
Okay, yeah, I did have concerns just about appearances and being heavily funded by a developer. This is a community plan, and my concern was just the appearance that that it be more of a community oriented grassroots start and finish. Yeah, it seems like the staff have addressed that heavily in their report. So we'll hope that that sticks, and I will support that on that grounds. So.
Good. Thank you, Director Bales. Further discussion. This is a very big project, and it seems like the staff have done a really good job of ensuring that our interests and the community's interests are represented and are defended from bias. So it'll be interesting to see this move forward. Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
Thank you, everyone. So the next item is 9.8, which is the Chilliwack River Valley Public Safety Risk Assessment. There is a motion for your consideration.
Okay, looking for a motion. Director Engard.
Moved.
Second, Director Stobart. Discussion.
Yes, please, Chair.
Director Engard, go ahead.
First, I want to thank the Planning Department and Graham Danluz for his persistence and extraordinary assistance over time with the different issues we have in the Chilliwack River Valley. Much appreciated. To be honest, I'm slightly conflicted with this situation, because in the past we had the HACO report, which outlined hazards in the valley, and to this day there's people that are still grumbling about it, because some homes are built prior to the hazard study. Excuse me. And it means that they have difficulty rebuilding if they ever had a fire, things like that. So this study, even though it's essential, and we need to find out where these areas of risk are for future issues, to prevent future issues, I am conflicted in that I sure wish there was a way to deal with those people that may be caught in this net. Inadvertently then having impacts on their home properties. Don't anticipate a huge number of people, but you just never know, and I am a little bit concerned. If there is any way to move forward with it in a process that could at least have that consideration in the front of our minds, I think it would be helpful. And I'm not quite sure what that would look like, so I'll be looking to staff for some more assistance as we move forward with it. But at this point in time, I think it's a necessary thing to have this public safety risk assessment done, and I support it with those caveats. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Engar. And certainly myself, would be very supportive of what Director Engar's position is. This is one of those things that staff need to move forward with, but it's a very delicate matter, and we need to be careful on and not treading on people's interests unnecessarily. So any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Contrary, the motion carries.
9.9, we have Crown referral for the Cascade Skyline Gondola and the Bridal Veil Mountain Resort in electoral areas D and E.
Okay, looking for a motion.
Director
Engar moves, second Director Raymond. Discussion.
Oh yes, I guess it's me again.
Director Engar, go ahead.
I seem to be hogging all the airspace today. I might as well finish off that way. Yeah, I'm as my interpretation of this is the province is throwing this at us. Here, have a look at what we're doing. But in this case, we're not making any recommendations. And it's just more of an informational update that the province is proceeding ahead, and we'll see how things turn out. Is that a correct assumption?
Correct.
Yes, but I see Graham Danilus coming on the line.
You and I again, Graham.
Thank you. Through the chair to Director Ungar. Yes, indeed, that's how we've approached this. Is a preliminary referral. We'll have opportunities to again receive referrals when the province sorts out which of these two, if either is going to proceed in the Crown land tendering. We'll have a formal opportunity to comment then, and that might be the opportunity where you make more substantive comments on the proposal. And of course, if either of these developments proceeds beyond that, then we're looking at community plan and zoning amendments, which I suggest would involve considerable public consultation and of course, board consideration.
Very good. Thanks a lot.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Thank you, Director Rangar. Certainly a lot of interest and media reports in the Vancouver press and local regarding this, but as staff have pointed out, we're very early in the process and we'll wait to see how things transpire, I think. Good. So
sorry, Dixon, I have one
Director
more.
Dixon, go ahead.
I think I'm asking the same question that Director Anger did. So right now is not the time for input from FERD as to whether or not the board even is interested in this kind of a proposal, right? So we're just submitting those 4 comments that are in the agenda about sort of what next steps and how we'd proceed down the road.
Mr. Daniels.
Thank you, Chair. Director Dixon, it's entirely appropriate for the committee and the board to return any comments that you feel like are appropriate in response to this preliminary referral. At a staff level, we felt like this isn't the time for us, for staff to attempt to evaluate each one of the proposals and compare and contrast and declare a favored one, in part because we expect one of these proposals to come to us as rezoning and community plan amendment applications. And we felt that, declaring support for one over the other might be seen by the public to be inappropriate, given that we'll be in a regulatory position with applications in the near future. Now, that said, it's not inappropriate if the committee or the board would like to make further comments or express concerns or identify elements of these proposals that are attractive, and maybe one has elements that you find attractive and the other doesn't. There's nothing, it would not be inappropriate if you'd wish to do that.
So
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Go ahead, Director Dixon.
Now I'm hogging all the airspace, Orion. So, if, for example, I had a thought that personally I didn't really care for either one of them and to leave the mountain alone, that would be out of line. So it sounds like it's what do we think about one or the other, or like, is there an opportunity to say neither? And I don't know how the board feels about this. That's the discussion I'm wondering.
Mr. Daniels, did you want to weigh in on this?
My suggestion would be, if that's the sentiment of EA directors, that perhaps the kind of comment that you'd like to add to the comments we return is that you've got significant concerns with both proposals, and it would be constructive to identify what some of those concerns might be.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. And maybe if I could interject, as it would seem that the terminals would be positioned in my electoral area. I certainly do not feel comfortable taking position on either of these proposals at this point. I look to my community to give me direction as to whether they are supportive or that they're not supportive of these projects. And I won't be taking a position until I do hear from my community. Director Raymond, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Danowitz, it's my understanding that the province has not given the okay to go ahead with this yet. They're still researching it. I would think that it would be a waste of our time to try and put a bunch of staff time into finding out what we don't like about it until we know if the province is even going to move ahead with these and which one they're going to move ahead with.
Thank you, Director Raymond. I'm not sure if Mr. Daniels wanted to respond to that or.
Yes, it is the case that the province has said that only one of these projects could move forward through the Crown tenure process. It would be a challenge at this point, I think, for staff to provide any kind of comprehensive advice about the projects. We've got, in some respects, a robust set of information, but only part of the picture on both projects, which is one of the reasons we took the approach with the staff report that we did. We really don't know a great deal about either of them at this point, and staff weren't comfortable declaring a preferred proponent because there's lots more we don't know. And also because, as I mentioned, we expect that in the near future, the regional district may be dealing with these applications as community plan and zoning amendments. And we thought it would be inappropriate for staff or to express some kind of preference for one over the other.
Thank you, Mr. Danilus. And just a bit of a historical perspective. In the time I've spent at the FERD, this would be now the 5th ski hill proposal that I've seen come to us, and I've yet to see any dirt moved. So the staff are tasked with a lot of big projects right now. I wouldn't want to see a lot of staff resources poured into this until we have something more definitive in place. Further discussion.
Bales.
Director Bales, go ahead.
I would say the same, that we wouldn't want staff to be tasked with this right now, but as far as the public goes, it would be a good time for them to get engaged. So I guess that's up to the area directors if they want to get their public engaged in writing about their feelings. The problem often is there's a lot of information not known yet. So, but if you wait for the province to make a decision, it's a little after the fact to complain about one or the other, or to complain about both, basically. So, yeah, it's probably a good time for the public to be engaged. I'm just thinking.
Director Engar.
Good, thank you, Director Bales. Director Engar, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I take that point to heart, Director Bales, and certainly my community they're chomping at the bit and they're engaged. So it's just a matter of release the hounds.
The game is afoot. Okay, thank you, Director Engar. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Contrary, motion carries.
So moving down, Mr. Chair, to reports by electoral area directors.
Yeah, could start off, Director Engar.
Well, thank you, Chair. Boy, I'm getting a lot of airtime today. Let me see. Had a great meeting on May the 20th with MLA Eby and Minister Eby, I'm sorry, and MLA Padden. And that was in regard to the homeless camps at the entrance to the Chilliwack River Valley. And I think one takeaway I'm hoping they took, and that was the main emphasis. I think they did take away the main point that I wanted to make was that regardless of how inadequately we can deal with homeless camps at this stage, the most important thing for my community is to have extra boots on the grounds to be able to monitor the situation, make sure there's no theft involved, make sure that seniors are not being intimidated, and those kind of fundamental things to the safety of my community. So I think they heard that, the call for more boots on the ground, and I am following up with a written submission directly to the minister and hope to have that ready fairly shortly. On another interesting topic for my area, we have these fishing boxes which are showing up in the Chilliwack region for actually recycling old fishing line and floats and things that usually just end up littering the edge of the river. So I got in touch with the nice woman who was dealing with that, and they've offered to give our area a couple of boxes to start out with as well. So our residents association is keen on that, and we should be moving ahead with that little project. Our fire department is planning a wildfire exercise And that will be on taking place in Slessie Park, to be announced when it will be. And they'll be doing a mock attention to the local area of how to deal with a wildfire specifically. Looking forward to that. We have a great bunch of guys out here that are really here to protect the community, and it's awesome for us to have that support and that safety factor. The slides, as we were talking about earlier on in the agenda, has been a big issue for our valley, and I'm glad to see we have such capable staff that are helping move these necessary issues ahead. So that's about it for me for now. Thanks very much.
Good. Thank you, Director Angar. So we're looking to Director Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just last night, I had an Area H town hall, and just want to send out a thank you to Ms. Kinnaman for joining me and helping to administer that whole thing, as well as MLA Patton and MP Mark Strahl. And it really was just an opportunity for us to provide a few updates of what's going on, but also to hear from the community. And some of the conversation topics where we dealt a little bit with the new tourism Chilliwack that we joined in with that. We talked about connectivity. Our fire department, the Columbia Valley one, is looking for new recruits. It was just a good opportunity to hear what people are thinking about. We know that Columbia Valley Highway is going to be paved sometime this summer. And so definitely a little bit of interruption going on there, but for a really good project. So once I know the dates on that, I'll be letting people know what's happening there. And another really good news for Cultus Lake is we had a Cultus Lake Water Safety Committee that began actually last summer after a powerboat hit one of our First Nation paddlers. And from there, a committee was put together. The paddler was fine, by the way, as far as you know, but it's to try to make the lake safer for everybody, as well as to continue to build greater understanding and respect. What came out of that was we were looking for phase 1, 2, and 3 for buoys that would be marking the 30-meter mark around the entire lake in the foreshore area. And in all waterways, apparently that's the slow zone, but it wasn't well marked. And so what we tried to do was, in our proposal, we wanted funding for that. And of course, nobody has any money. But Chief David Jimmy offered to go forward to his contacts and was able to secure funding for the entire project, all 3 phases rather than just 1 phase. And so right now, BC Parks is working together with, I think it's with our First Nations partners, just to place those buoys, and then hopefully that will provide a little bit of a safer zone for the non-motorized craft, and definitely a clear guidance for the power boats to recognize where the slow zones are. And so we're looking forward to seeing how, the type of difference that makes. The other thing, last thing too, the orange pylons will be going up all along the lake road to mark the no parking zones. And again, this is intended to just make it a safer area and to allow room for emergency vehicles to get by. It's really hard to pull over when there's cars parked in all those spots. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Dixon. Director Adamson.
Yeah, Area B's been pretty busy lately. I got a call a couple weeks ago from Minister Bear, who congratulating us on getting getting a grant to hook up the fiber optics right to our houses. It's really exciting. We're going practically all of Area B on the north side of the river will be done. Just Spuzzum, it hasn't gone that far. So Spuzzum and Boston Bar in between there will have to be done in the future. But it's exciting. Everybody's happy. It's payoff from lots of work from lots of people. We started 3 years ago, maybe 4. It had a petition saying that we needed high-speed internet there. Our provider was actually leaving the area. There was on Looky Loo, they were a company that provided line of sight. So if you could see their tower, you could get it. Down in places like Dogwood, that was really hard, lots of trees and stuff. So it was hard to get that for a lot of people. And we all know how important internet is for everybody nowadays. It's like you got to have it. So this will enable people to work from home more, because it's going to bring us up to the same speed as any city. You know, it's going to be like fiber optics right to your house. I see them when I drive by. I see them working on all on the side of the highway, and everybody's talking about it. Everybody's really grateful. I want to thank staff. There was a lot of staff work on this. Numerous staff over the years. I think Millie Marshall worked on this. We had Penner, Barry Penner, when he was working for the organization. He went to meetings with myself. And I know that everybody in all the electoral areas should have it, but we had started this project 4 years ago, and what happened with COVID money coming, the TELUS got a hold of me months ago and said that they wanted to put an application for what we had been working on before. And I said, yeah, great, go ahead. I gave them a letter of support. Staff was helpful, and paid off. Yay. So we got that coming. The Tajmi Museum opened up last week, and it's only open Saturdays and Sundays, but they got a new display room. It's really cool. Well worth going up and seeing. So that's going on. We got the thrift store in Yale is going to be opening up starting Saturday. They haven't finished all the renovations, but they're opening up one room to get because people come by and say, when are you opening? So they're going to open Saturday. So that'll be good. If anybody's up here, drop in. They got lots of neat stuff for cheap. What else is happening? Everybody's looking forward to the time that we can get back into the community center. Now that the province seems to be opening up doors, we're hoping that we can get in our community center soon so we can get some programs happening. And I guess that's about it. So thank you.
Good. Congratulations, Director Adamson, getting that fiber optics. That's a real success. Director Stobart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pretty quiet in Area G as usual. We did have the opening of the Roche Farmers Market this past weekend. Went very well from all accounts. Yeah, I'm still looking. Community Association line, looking to get back out there, start doing work with and about the community again. It's been a long hiatus and people are getting a little itchy. So I'm hoping that can move ahead shortly. And other than that, the cows are content.
Thank you, Director Stobart. Director Raymond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things here. The whole community is going to be receiving their second vaccination tomorrow, the Moderna vaccination. That'll be their second one. Also, I have a complaint that I've put into the Emergency Health Services Commission. A gentleman in our community had a heart attack. The ambulance station is directly across the street from it. Yet our fire department, which come in from North Bend, got in their trucks, drove up to that site, still waited for 20 minutes for that ambulance to get across the street. That gentleman died. So I have a complaint into Emergency Health Services Commission over that. And I know there's a lot going on in the province with ambulance service right now and the lack of staff. Our people here, when they're working here, get $2 an hour unless they're called out. In one instance, they were told, when it was actually me that called the ambulance, we were told that it was going to be there right away. I phoned back a half hour later and they said I had to give them a chance to come from their residence to get to the ambulance station. However, I had to correct them because here the ambulance personnel stay in the station. But they didn't quite believe me, so I had them check it out and they had to apologize later. So there are issues going on. I don't think I'm just the only area that's having that problem. I think it's going on province-wide. And I think it's high time we might have to take a bigger stance in this. Thank you.
Good. That's a tragic situation, Director Raymond. Sorry to hear about it. Director Bales.
Well, that is tragic. And I certainly support something at UBCM with Director Raymond on discussions with that issue, because I know it's come up in the past as well as how long it takes for an ambulance and our own firefighters are certainly on the site in general a lot quicker quite often. Anyway, in my area, there's been a lot of issues, but one thing that's come up, and I have to write an email to everybody, there's been some recent B&Es, so I'll be writing that out. My neighbor told me that on the same day as the B&E or in our neighborhood that there was a drone flying around the neighborhood. I don't know if that is a new technique or whether it just happened to be a coincidence. So that would be an interesting thing to think about. And other than that, I'm also looking forward to hopefully things opening up and getting into actual public meetings. I think they're far more effective than the online version. So I'm hoping that things will open up fairly soon. So I guess that's it for now.
Good. Thank you, Director Bales.
Sorry. One more thing.
Yeah.
Just another update is I was talking to Moti and they will be getting some no parking signs up for Lake Eric, similar to Cultus. Parking has been a big issue. So looking forward to that as well.
Good. Thank you for the update, Director Bales. Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. So first off, I'm consumed by extreme jealousy of Director Adamson's internet success. I'm really looking forward to an update from our staff in that matter. I appreciate it's not an easy thing, but it's glad to hear that there are some successes going on. I did just want to sort of give directors food for thought, and I apologize for not bringing this up during the agenda, but for the water bylaw and the Hatzic Prairie additions to our Hatzic Prairie Water Service Area, if there's any way that the consultation can be done quickly, and if there's any chance that we could get it before the board for adoption on the upcoming board, I'd be very, very happy to see that happen. So that's both to staff and my fellow directors on it. I don't know if it's possible, but it's just in consideration of those people who have been waiting for water for some time. That being said, I did have something to report. A couple of weeks ago, I went on a walkthrough with some local area residents and a forester hired by Matsqui First Nations Band as part of the First Nations Reconciliation program. There's a woodlot license in this area, and forestry in what basically are some people's backyards is never welcome. But the forester, a fellow named Denny Pelche, was great. He walked through the area with the residents. They're doing a selective logging process, or that they hope to do it, I should say. But what I really wanted to share was just the approach that Matsqui First Nations has directed their forester to try to take with the province on this one, is that the process is going to be one of inventory of the trees that are marketable, getting a price for those trees, and then harvesting. So they're trying to defer harvesting until they know they want to sell them, which is new, innovative, never heard of it before, and they're having a bit of a time getting it through Flinrod. But I thought I would just share that with people because it is an interesting way of looking at it, and it's coming out of First Nations management of the woodlot. try to do things in as low impact, as respectful a way as they possibly can. And I thought it was a very, very positive way of looking at it. I just want to share that with everybody. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Davidson. And Popham Bridal Falls community, on this past Tuesday, we held a public hearing to discuss a proposed rezoning of some perhaps commercial land near the intersection of Highway 1 and Highway 9. I just wanted to thank the planning staff for the exceptional work they've done stick handling this this application through the different channels. And we'll look forward to a vote at either this month's board or the coming July's board, I'm expecting. Other than that, I don't have anything else to report. It would be maybe Director or Ms. Kinnaman could give us an idea of if there's any chance that the July East meeting would be held within the boardroom.
So thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Chair. So I actually do have an email drafted to all of you, which I'm hoping to send on around June 15th, because that is sort of the next decision point from the provincial health officer. All things looking as they currently do, I look forward to being able to invite our 14 jurisdictions into the boardroom for the June 24th meeting, which would mean that there are 14 electoral area director seats available, with the remainder that would participate via Zoom, and a couple of staff members would be able to be in the room for that meeting. We expect that we would still have to maintain all of the environmental controls, the physical distancing. We would still have masks that are mandatory in the common areas of the building. So if you were to enter the building, you would still need to be masked, but once seated at the table, you would be able to have your mask removed, since we would still have 6 feet apart. Once the next point, the decision point, would be the first part of July. And so I do expect, again, all things remaining as they have been and looking encouraging for our RACs and East meetings for July. We would be able to invite all of our committee members to the table if they so choose. And again, that's the big point here, is that people have to feel comfortable that they want to come in person to a meeting of that nature. So essentially stay tuned at this point. We are following the provincial health order guidelines very closely. We have staff that look those up every single day, and believe it or not, there are changes to the provincial health order almost daily with respect to how the various businesses operate and function. And there isn't a lot of guidance within the document that tells you what's changed. And so staff have to go through very closely to identify what's new and how that might impact our organization. So my fingers are crossed. I think everything looks really good for the resumption of some level of in-person meeting going forward. And I think many of you are as zoomed out as the rest of us. Not that we don't think this is a valuable tool, and we welcome the ability to continue using this tool for certain situations, but certainly not as an exclusive use anyway.
Good. Thank you for the very nice report, Ms. Kinnaman. It'd be nice to get things back to normal. So that would bring us to adjournment. Is that right?
Actually, we just have to do public question period for items relevant to the agenda. I understand that we did not receive any email submissions. And Ms. Van Ness, do we have anybody still on the line?
No, we did have a few members of the public that joined us throughout the meeting, but we currently do not have anybody on the line. So no public questions.
Perfect. So then we would look for a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Kinnaman. Motion to adjourn. Move Director Bale, second Director Raymond. Discussion, seeing none. All in favor, contrary, motion carries. Thanks, staff. Thank you, directors.
Everybody.
Thank you.